welcome to our sixth and final part on our series explaining all of synthesis. We've talked about pretty much all the important stuff, so let's get to some less important stuff. I've been using the Ableton wavetable as a sort of guide on what the average synthesizer has, so I'm going to continue to do that. We start out with our oscillators. Something we haven't talked about is the sub. It's just a third oscillator that'll play an octave below the note that's actually being input. It's used a lot of times for bass patches to give it that extra bassy feel. You can select how much lower you want it from the note that you're actually playing, 0 octaves below, 1 or 2, and you can select the tone. It starts on a sine wave and can be brought up all the way to a square. Next we have transpose. It just transposes the notes. In part 3, we talked about the filter, of which Ableton gives us 2. Something I didn't mention at the time is that you have these different options on how to process the filters. The serial takes the sound from both oscillators, passes them through filter 1, and then passes the output of that into filter 2. Meanwhile, parallel splits the signal from the oscillators into 2 identical but half in volume copies, processes one through filter 1 and the other through filter 2. And split has filter 1 affect oscillator 1 and filter 2 affect oscillator 2. In part 4, we talked about our amplitude envelope and our spare envelopes as well. And in part 5, we talked about our LFOs that let us modulate things and the matrix that lets us do all of that. And lastly, there's this panel over here that we have not discussed. This button over here that says poly stands for polyphonic, as in poly, many phonic sounds, telling us this is a synth that can play many sounds. How many? Up to 8. But you can select how many you want it to be able to play from the dropdown. So if I play a chord, you'll hear all the notes from that chord. If, however, I select mono, you can only hear one note at a time. That's good for like leads. So that way, if I'm playing a melody and the notes kind of step on one another, if it's in poly, you'll hear it. But if it's in mono, you won't. And mono allows me to play with glide, which is IMO, the most fun a girl can have on a synthesizer. Here it's measured in milliseconds, which is just how many milliseconds it'll take to go from one MIDI pitch to another. This only works if the notes overlap. So if the MIDI off for the first note is triggered after the MIDI on for the second note. I'm going to set it to 300 so you can really hear what it sounds like. And lastly, we have Unison. If you click the drop down, you'll get all these different algorithms, but basically what it does is it plays multiple copies of the note on top of each other and modifies them just a little. Each algorithm will do it in a different way. If it didn't modify them, you would just hear the same sounds louder. But because they're a little bit distorted, be it in pitch or time, it gives it a fuller and more complex sound. For example, I'm going to set it to 6 voices, start the amount at 0, and crank it up so you can hear what it's doing. Is that a supersaw I hear? Yes, it is. The supersaw is a staple of a lot of EDM genres. You've heard it in trance, you've heard it in bass. This is how you accomplish it. It is literally multiple saw waves stacked on top of each other. And that's pretty much it. I did, however, want to remind you that if you're into sound design, so much of it happens with the audio effects. Once you've designed a patch you like, don't be afraid to make it a little bit richer with some audio effects. Here's just a handful of effects that come stock with most DAWs, and honestly, each of them could be their own video, so leave in the comments if you're interested in any of that. But with that, I will conclude our series on all of synthesis. Thanks for tuning in. I'm so glad it's helped so many of you. See you soon.